All right, well, good morning, everybody. I am absolutely honored and delighted to be standing here with colleagues and friends who are committed to standing up for life and standing up for the rule of law. I set out with my good friend and co-chairman Andy Biggs to send a letter to the Department of Justice, as did my good friend and fellow Texan Pat Fallon, to try to stop the absolute atrocity of having the Department of Justice make sure they understand that what was going on here in the District of Columbia with the discarding of human remains, of lives, of precious lives, which seem to have indicated the possibility of crime being committed in violation of law. We have laws on the books to make sure that we do not continue to carry out the barbaric practices of partial birth abortions or late-term abortions, and we need to make sure that the laws are followed. And we've seen the continued evidence that's mounted on that, and just so thankful for all of the groups that are here today and all of the groups that have been so involved with making sure that we're exposing the truth and exposing what's happening. This goes all the way back to my time when I was the first Assistant Attorney General under Attorney General Ken Paxton, and we were seeing those videos, the horrific videos from Planned Parenthood, what we see in the total crass disregard for life. I remember my godson, who is alive today, and his mom, my dear friend, was told that she should abort him because a scan showed, some separation in the hemispheres of the brain, which turned out to be false. But if she made that choice, my godson wouldn't be with us today. It's the way she described it. The doctor came in with this cold callous, like you're almost ordering at Starbucks, just said you should go get an abortion. We are standing against that kind of callousness against life. We are united to continue to advance the defense of life. And I'm so proud to be here with these great individuals who are standing up, but we're going to continue to call this out. We need to protect these individual lives. These 5 precious lives deserve to be respected, and we're here united to say that that should be done. And again, I appreciate my colleagues, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend Andy Biggs.
I thank Chip for leading on this. He's done a great job, and it's great to stand with so many pro-life advocates. We all recognize every life has value, every life. We're all created in the image of God. And I thank all of those who stand with us today. The DC 5 abortion case is horrifying, period, full stop, horrifying. When we consider that anyone would use the barbaric practice of partial birth abortion, we must discover what happened and hold those individuals accountable. Killing a child, let alone 5, through a partial birth abortion is a crime under federal law. The Supreme Court of the U.S. upheld the federal ban on partial birth abortion in 2007. And both the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and Biden's Department of Justice chose to ignore any potential evidence of crime for 2 years. The MPD and DOJ's investigation was insufficient. It was inadequate. The DOJ's effort to dispose of these bodies without conducting an investigation is simply malpractice, and it is wrong. Based on evidence collected at the time of recovery and the disturbing photos shared, these children appeared to have likely suffered through the procedure of partial birth abortion. We need to further investigate all of this. We need hearings. We need proper burial for these children. We need to respect their lives. The House Committee on the Judiciary, which Mr. Roy and I sit on, has jurisdiction over Washington, D.C. criminal law and federal law enforcement pursuant to House Rule 10. Last week, Mr. Roy led a letter, and I joined him on it. Appreciate that. Sent a letter to the MPD and D.C. Mayor to preserve these remains. And then on Friday, the D.C. medical examiner honored the request to preserve these babies for the time being. That's a step in the right direction, but these bodies must be preserved, answers must be had, and further protections must be invoked. Thank you for being here, and I will just conclude by saying Americans deserve to know what's happening right here in the nation's capital, the destruction of human life. With that, I am pleased to turn and yield this microphone over to my friend, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Representative Bob Good of Virginia.
Thank you, Chairman Biggs, and thank you everybody for being here today to discuss what is actually a difficult topic, and it illustrates where we are as a country. But to lay out some of the facts that brought us here specific to this press conference, in March 2022, Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising activists claimed to have obtained a box from a whistleblower that contained 115 aborted children from the Washington Surgery Clinic, a facility operated by the late-term abortionist Dr. Santangelo. 5 of these babies appear to have sustained injuries, suggesting they were killed using the illegal partial birth abortion method, which I won't describe at this press conference. Or perhaps they were born alive and just abandoned to die, one of the two. Title 18, Section 1531 of the U.S. Code makes partial birth abortion illegal. Thousands of pro-life activists called on the D.C. Metropolitan Police to investigate this gruesome slaughter of these innocent 5 babies. Investigate their killer, Dr. Santangelo, and to give these little ones a proper burial. D.C. Metro Police dismissed them as legally aborted medical waste and refused to perform an autopsy, investigate the murder, or seek justice for these 5 children. The DOJ has directed the D.C. medical examiner to destroy the remains of the bodies of the DC-5. And I'm thankful to our colleagues here today who advocated, who stepped in the gap, Chairman Roy, Chairman Biggs, Congressman Fallon. These babies before that never had anyone to advocate for them, and the very law enforcement tasked with protecting the most vulnerable in our society that has become complicit in covering up the cold-blooded murder of these precious lives. The Washington Post, citing 2 anonymous sources, reported in 2022 that the D.C. Medical Examiner's Office again had no plans to conduct an autopsy. And all that had been publicly said by officials about the legality of these killings, that the 5 babies' remains were recovered, but they were aborted in accordance with the D.C. law, which allows abortions up to 9 months. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for intervening, for everyone gathering here today in the name of the most precious, most fundamental of rights that we have, the right to life. And we're calling for transparency for how these babies were killed. The American people should know that federal law was broken right here in this Washington, D.C. in these tragic cases. We all know life begins at conception. The science confirms that, period. We should protect life from conception, let alone to investigate and hold accountable those who may have perpetrated the most heinous of abortion crime, or even allowing babies born alive to die there in the so-called medical facility. So I join my colleagues in calling on the House and the Senate to call for an autopsy on these 5 precious Americans who were not afforded the liberty that we enjoy today. And with that, I yield to my friend from Texas, Pat Fallon.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for coming today, and thank you for my colleagues. We're here to stick up for those that don't have a voice, and we must get to the bottom of what really happened to the DC-5. And just in context, in 2022, the remains of 115 babies were found outside a DC abortion clinic, and 5 were victims of either late-term abortions or they were allowed to be born and then they were abandoned. I can't think of anything, as my good friend Bob Good said, more heinous or more barbaric. And it's really about as bad as it gets. Soon after the discovery of the remains, Congressional Republicans in 2022 cried out and demanded autopsies and an investigation. Fast forward, no autopsy, no investigation. You have to ask yourself, why? Are we a country that has a rule of law or not? Does the Justice Department actually dispense justice? I think those are very fair questions. And with the emergence of new evidence, I led a letter that had 44 of my Republican colleagues sign on last week because we need to protect those that are so vulnerable. And we demanded that the DOJ halt the medical examiner's plan to dispose of the bodies and conduct an investigation. So we are glad that, at least for now, they haven't disposed of the bodies. But doctors have looked at these victims. These are murders. This really, honestly, doesn't have anything to do with abortion. This is about murders. And yet, nothing's been done. So the big question is, why has Biden's DOJ refused to investigate? What are they hiding? And who are they protecting? The fight isn't over. The Biden DOJ has already ignored the issues for the past 2 years. We need to bring them to light. And it's high time Congress conduct its own investigation, because the DOJ, if they won't seek justice, then Congress, I think, is compelled to. Enough of the stonewalling and enough of yet another act of deception by Merrick Garland's Justice Department. So I want to thank everybody again for being here, and my colleagues for fighting the good fight. And I think that heckler was from the DOJ. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me introduce my good friend, Chris Smith, who is the co-chair of the Pro-Life Caucus.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you to my colleagues for the leadership. Thank you to Teresa for her bold leadership on this issue. Where is the compassion? My name is Chris Smith. I'm from New Jersey, 4th District. Where is the compassion? Where is the outrage? Where is the empathy for 5 precious children who were brutally slaughtered by abortion? Where is the justice? Why the cover-up? Under absolutely no circumstances should the D.C. medical examiner discard the bodies of 5 innocent children whose lives were taken in such a barbaric manner. If the DOJ is not going to fulfill its duty to investigate the potential federal crimes committed against these child victims, then Congress should immediately take up its own investigation and demand, at a minimum, the preservation of evidence. When they were alive, these babies deserve to be treated with respect and compassion. Now, after their violent slaughter, justice must be tenaciously pursued with a thorough investigation into the details surrounding their brutal deaths. No cover-ups.
From the DOJ too?
Remember Kermit Gosnell? He butchered babies and stored them, warehoused them, and was found guilty in 2013, and he went to jail. There are Kermit Gosnells all over America. Predators, child abusers, exploiters of women. Will Americans ever be told the horrifying details as to how and how often abortionists dismember, decapitate, and chemically poison innocent babies? Don't destroy the evidence. No cover-ups. We demand justice.
For those that are even pro-abortion that might be here today, I think it's important to note that Dr. Angela was actually had performed a botched abortion that was so badly done that the woman died. They found fetal tissue within her lungs. And so if you are even advocating this, you have to understand that this person has hurt other people and has indeed broken the law. But I want to also put out a public request for help because we are having issues locating someone that will conduct the autopsy to determine the cause of death. The reason why these children have not been able to be buried is because of that. People are afraid of losing their medical license or examiner license here in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. So if you know anyone, please refer them to any one of our offices so that we can do that. We've had people from the community step up to donate vaults and caskets so that we can have a funeral service for these children. But when you look at those photos and you see what is done, you know, especially as a new mother, to understand that this individual performed an abortion to where if this was in a hospital, this child would have essentially lived, that one of the children was actually suffocated in their own amniotic fluid. It's inhumane. You know, we have certain practices in this country, and to cause and inflict pain like that is something that I don't think anyone standing in this crowd can get behind. So we ask for your help. Please help us find a medical examiner to conduct these autopsies so we can give them a proper burial. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Teresa Bukovnik, the founder of PAAU and the individual who co-discovered the DC5.
Thank you all for being here. I want to extend my profound thanks to Representative Chip Roy and to all of the members who have come today to lend their voices courageously in defense of these children. In March of 2022, myself and Lauren Handy went to the Washington Surgery Center to help mothers in crisis. But instead, we recovered the remains of the DC5 unexpectedly, who were headed for an incinerator to produce electricity for the city of Baltimore. Pulling their broken bodies from that box was the most viscerally heartbreaking experience that I have ever had. This is a seminal moment for the pro-life movement, a moment that is so palpable and with so much power that it can change the course of history forever. 5 babies were murdered in our nation's capital, and their killer continues to kill today, just 2 miles from here. These babies are to the pro-life cause what the Nepal girl was to hastening the end of the Vietnam War, or Emmett Till to sparking the civil rights movement. Will there be justice for the 5. I want to introduce Jamie Dangers, the Legislative Director of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. It is a privilege to stand with heroes like Teresa who have shown such courage in exposing the brutality of abortion here in our nation's capital. And I want to say the names that have been given to the DC-5. Their names are Angel, Christopher X, Harriet, Holly, and Phoenix. They have names because they are children, they are human, and their lives were cut short by a late-term abortionist, Dr. Santangelo, 5 blocks from the White House. These children, Angel, Christopher X, Harriet, Holly, and Phoenix, should be toddling around right now, causing chaos and laughter like all toddlers do. That's what they should be doing, because they are children. Instead, their bodies are lying cold, awaiting, we don't know what yet. We want autopsies and full investigations to uncover what look very likely to be federal crimes of partial birth abortion and infanticide. It is very easy for people who support abortion, for pro-abortion politicians and for this administration to talk about reproductive freedom. These are the faces of reproductive freedom. When you allow reproductive freedom, you allow Angel and Christopher X and Harriet and Holly and Phoenix to be killed in brutal and horrific ways. Their blood is crying out, and we're giving voice to them today. And we are demanding justice for them and for the many who have not been found, but whose bodies were similarly destroyed in this clinic in Washington, D.C. And I want to introduce to you Penny Nance, the CEO and President of Concerned Women for America.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to the members of the press that are braving the cold coming out with us today. Thank you so much. This is really important. I'm the President and CEO of Concerned Women for America. We're the nation's largest public policy organization for women. We are pro-life. But let's be clear here, you don't have to be pro-life to be with us on this issue. I think that this is something that everyone should be able to stand together on. This is infanticide. You know, Teresa told you about being there that day, and I so appreciate Jamie repeating the names. These were human beings. If you believe in human rights, you need to understand what happened and stand with us today. These little children, and if you have the stomach to look, and honestly, I don't think everyone should, because if you are recovering from the trauma of abortion, you may not be ready to look. But on concernedwomen.org's website, we have a video called So You Think You're Pro-Choice. And it shows the pictures of these little children from as small as the size of a dime, but you can still see their little arms and legs. These are human beings. What we're talking about is the other end of the spectrum. Babies who are almost full term. And you can see that their little bodies have been desecrated. Their heads collapsed in because a partial birth abortion clearly was performed. Early in my career, one of my first things that I worked on in Capitol Hill was the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. And I was a young, bright-eyed 20-something showing members of Congress with a medical model baby what happened in a partial birth abortion. And they were disgusted to the point that Patrick Kennedy voted with us. This was a left and right issue. This is exactly what they were trying to guard against. It is illegal. It is a violation of federal law, and Santangelo is basically operating as Kermit Gosnell in Washington, D.C. It has to stop. I have friends that work in the medical community at Georgetown Hospital. They see the damage that he has wrought all the time. He is a madman that is being allowed to perform late-term abortions on little babies that you must see. It's absolutely despicable. But I also want to add one thing. I am so grateful to be here. I'm so proud of Chip Roy and others that have stood up on this issue. And I'm so grateful to be joined with Teresa and our progressive friends who understand human rights. But I also want to bring up one other thing. I'm grateful for Chip Roy. for introducing the repeal of the FACE Act, because it is being, at this time, weaponized against pro-lifers. And Lauren Handy, who was there at this moment, shockingly, was arrested under FACE and sentenced to 11 years in prison. We have got to change what's happening right now under the Biden administration, under DOJ. We've got to stop weaponizing FACE, and we've got to get to the bottom and start enforcing the law on partial birth abortion ban act. So thank you so much. And after me is Susan Derechek from Students for Life.
Thank you, Penny. My name is Savannah Deretich, and I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator with Students for Life in Action. The pro-life generation demands justice for the 5 aborted infants and so many more who lost their lives to abortion in the heart of our nation's capital. Students for Life Action's President Kristen Hawkins stated, if these 5 fetuses, these 5 innocent children, died from an act of infanticide or unconstitutional partial birth abortions, people must be held criminally accountable. Students for Life Action calls on DC Police Chief and Congress to do the job that neither Biden's Department of Justice nor DC's mayor seems inclined to do: investigate late-term abortion in DC. We are told that the city medical examiner has no plans to do the job required and determine how the babies died, and that DC Police Executive Assistant Chief of Policy claims that these 5 fetuses were aborted in accordance with DC law. How can they tell anything of the sort without an autopsy? We need to know if those babies drew a breath and then were killed outside of the womb in an act of infanticide. We need to know if the disreputable abortion vendor in question used an illegal partial birth abortion to end a life. It's of vital public interest to know whether illegal means are being used to end the lives of babies late in pregnancy, especially when you consider late-term abortion businesses operating here. As Charlotte Lozier reports, a Planned Parenthood mega center performs abortions up to 19 weeks and 6 days gestation, while Washington Surgery Clinic advertises abortions through 27 plus weeks, and DuPont Clinic, a referral center for high-risk abortion cases, performs abortions through 31 weeks of gestation for any reason. Capital Women's Group, associated with infamous abortion doctor Stephen Brigham, advertises abortion up to 36 weeks of gestation. Additionally, pro-choice groups report that a DC hospital performs abortions through the 2nd trimester. No one needs to tell us at Students for Life that DC Mayor Muriel Bowser is biased in favor of abortion when you consider that she sent police to arrest 2 of our students for chalking Black Preborn Lives Matter. But we have not gone anywhere close to stamping a case closed on these deaths. Chief Conte, please bring justice to these 5 preborn citizens of the district who deserved better. These 5 fetuses, these innocent preborn children, deserved better. We must save others from suffering the same fate. Sorry, I'll introduce Ben Sisney from...
Hi, I'm Ben Sisney. I'm an attorney with the American Center for Law and Justice here in D.C. It is our honor to represent the Reverend Patrick Mahoney and his wife Katie, who are here today. Now we'll hear from Reverend Mahoney. Thank you.
I'm Reverend Patrick Mahoney, Director of the Christian Defense Coalition and Chief Strategy Officer for Stanton Public Policy Center. I would like to thank Chairman Roy, Biggs, members of Congress, the pro-life community for standing here today for human rights and calling for justice for the 5. I also would like to thank the American Center for Law and Justice for their stellar legal work as they passionately fought up into the last minute to ensure these precious children were not cremated last week. When these children were obtained by the pro-life group PAAU, it was clear that they had experienced partial birth abortion and infanticide, which is illegal. Today, Lauren Handy and 8 other pro-life heroes are facing potentially 11 years in federal prison for peacefully intervening to save children from abortion violence at the exact same clinic where the DC-5 were killed. And part of their defense is that they intervened to prevent illegal activity. This is why an autopsy is so critical for their case and for justice for the 5. After the autopsy, we are seeking these children be given to the pro-life community to receive a proper burial. Philippians 1:3 says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. Psalm 116:15, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his children. Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel said, to forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time. We gather here today to say we will not forget these precious children. Your lives had dignity, purpose, and meaning. You were precious creations in the sight of God. That is why we are working with the ACLJ and the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. as we petition the D.C. Medical Office to release these children to ensure they receive an honorable and dignified burial after the autopsy. It is our hope and prayer they will end up in a Catholic cemetery here in our nation's capital where they can be visited and remembered and not casually thrown into an unmarked grave as something to be disposed of. I close with the words of a sacred Jewish prayer. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. To the DC-5, you are part of us. We will remember you. We will always fight for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Reverend. I just want to close out and just say thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. A few have had to go on to other committee work, which I'll be heading to momentarily. But we're here to remember the DC-5, but to fight for them. And fight for them to be treated as they should be treated. I think it's really important, right? If a 1-month-old child was just discarded and just tossed aside, imagine the horror. Imagine all the news stories. Imagine what you'd see on, CNN, local news, Fox News, whatever. And here we're talking about precious life that was just callously disregarded, discarded, just thrown away like refuse. That's just unconscionable. So that's actually what, to me, is the most compelling point of all of this, in addition to laws that need to be followed. We're a country of laws. And so when we gather here today, we're talking about both that violation of our conscience in terms of how these human beings were treated and the violation of law. That's why that's what Chairman Biggs and I sent our letter to the city and saying, hey, what are you doing? And we're glad the medical examiner paused. But now what, right? We need to go seek the truth. We need to know what's going to happen next. We need the Department of Justice, as my colleague Pat Fallon pointed out, to look into this. And we have jurisdiction over the District of Columbia. Congress does, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're standing in front of the Capitol. The District of Columbia is the nation's capital. We have jurisdiction, and the city needs to answer to us when we're trying to stand up in defense of these precious lives. On the FACE Act, I could not agree more. And we're not here to talk about the FACE Act, but we are here to talk about life. And if we have citizens across all ideologies, whether you're talking about progressives, Teresa, take off. Whether we're talking about progressive, whether we're talking about conservatives, we want to protect free speech, protect people's rights to be able to go out and exercise their ability to assemble, to be able to speak out. And that's critically important. And I hope the Judiciary Committee will take up the FACE Act. I hope we will pass it. I hope we'll send it to the floor. I hope we'll send it to the Senate. I believe there can be bipartisan support for that, because we need to stand up and stop this persecution of people from carrying out their closely held religious beliefs, their free speech rights. That's what's happening. The Department of Justice is using it as a weapon.
That's right.
Right? We have 140 or so examples of it being used specifically against pro-life activists, and like 3 in other cases. It's being weaponized against the people. That needs to stop, and we're not going to stop until we make sure that that is signed into law and that we can protect the American citizens. we'll take a few questions. Yes, sir.
Why is Washington, D.C. so quick to arrest a couple kids for shocking Black Preborn Lives Matter, but they won't even entertain an investigation of someone who potentially committed infanticide?
Well, I mean, I think that's the question that you raise is critically important. It's why we're here. It's why we're trying to raise these issues. And I think you know the answer, right? I mean, it's the cynical disregard of life. It's the cynical disregard of the laws in advance of a radical agenda. And that radical agenda has been evidenced by a few people, not many, that have walked by here and heckled, right? The fellow that would literally just chanted, "Abortion forever, you fascists." I mean, like, what does that say about the cultural rot in this country and that exists and is exemplified right here in the nation's capital, right? You want to know what's wrong with this country? The fact that a mere 15 years ago, 17% of Americans said that they have no affiliation with a church. Now 28% of Americans say they have no affiliation with a church. We have a growing unchurched population. People are moving away from our Creator and moving away from all the values that we hold dear. But importantly, even if you put that aside, we're moving away from the rule of law. The rule of law matters. We're disregarding the rule of law. The culture of life and that which God gave us matters, and we're moving away from that. We need to bring that back. I think there's an energetic movement by young people that understand life's important, and it's growing. And I think I'm actually very bullish that the next generation of Americans are going to cast aside this radical agenda that has been trying to destroy what is great and good about Western civilization in this country. Yep.
You would mention the hardest thing you're facing right now is to find a doctor to be able to perform an autopsy. Can Congress do anything to protect that doctor, he or she licensed, and be able to perform and find out the reasons why these 5 died?
Well, I mean, this is part of what we're trying to do and pushing on and have the Department of Justice, and we need to apply pressure because in the immediate moment, right, I mean, getting a law passed out of the House over to the Senate and signed by the President to accomplish any objective like you just outlined seems pretty scant in terms of our likelihood of success. We've got to continue to push under our current laws to force and expose this, to frankly shame the Department of Justice and shame the D.C. City Council and the government here in D.C. to make sure that we can bring forward somebody to actually perform the autopsy, do their job. They should be able to do that without, facing persecution. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to your interactions with your fellow colleagues in the House that we didn't see out here today? I'm curious how big the cohort of members is on the Hill to actually do something about this, hold these investigations and hearings.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you had, I think we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5, 6 members, I think, here in a not warm day. And thank you all for being here, by the way, in the cold. But it tells you a lot, right? I mean, with everybody, this is committee time right now, right? And so we had 6 members who were here. And I don't know if Chris wants to say anything about this, but he leads the Pro-Life Coalition. We've got, lots of people in the body that are concerned about this issue.
Chip, thank you very much. Our leadership, as well as the rank and file in the House, are outraged over what is happening. The cover-up is unconscionable, and I do hope you'll probe into it. If they have nothing to hide, then allow an autopsy. And I want to thank Chip Roy for what he's doing on the Facebook. In 1993, I led the opposition to it. Yep. And the whole idea of nonviolent civil disobedience garnering felonies and long prison sentences is absolutely contrary to all that is America. Matter of fact, the Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King would have found that he would have been put away for dozens of years because he did nonviolent civil disobedience. In this case, they were just taking some evidence of children who had been brutally slain. Obviously, and Chip knows this because he's doing a tremendous job leading this, we believe that partial birth abortion did occur by just the pictures and what we can see visually from the remains of these children. And then the Born Alive Act seems to have been violated as well. Let me remind everybody that in the Partial Birth Abortion Act, there is an absolutely clear prohibition against prosecuting women. That false narrative is out there all the time on the other side. It's right there in black and white. We want the doctor who killed these kids in a horrific fashion. And again, I brought up, as did Penny, the whole issue of Gosnell. It was a grand jury investigation. I remember reading their very long investigative, what they found. I had to put it down several times. It was so horrific what he was doing to these kids. He called it snippings when he would cut the back of their necks. We have 5 kids that represents many more than 5 and I'm so glad they have names who have been brutally slain. Our pro-life caucus and our pro-life members in the House and Senate are very, very strong. This is an outrage. It has to stop, and minimally preserve the evidence. As I said before, Chip said it, we all said it, no cover-up.
All right, thank you, Congressman.
Yeah, let me just add one point to that. I mean, the point about the law being violated, partial birth abortion, these laws exist for a reason. They've been fought for a long time for a reason. And I brought up that point about when I was the first assistant attorney general and I was in Texas, and the videos that we all saw from Planned Parenthood, which began to expose and let people understand and see this. I mean, you know, we cleanse over this stuff. And I once talked on a radio program, and man, all the callers calling in because they didn't want to hear it. But when you see the videos and you see the arms being picked through, like, with, you know, you can't even imagine that in the United States of America this kind of barbarism is allowed, and that we see it unfold. And so this is what this is about. We have to call it out. We need to expose it and make sure that we do everything we can do to prevent it. One last question. Here we go. Yes, ma'am.
It's been over 2 years since you called for an investigation. What have you been doing behind the scenes, either with communications with the DOJ, the city, to move that forward, secure non-toxic?
Well, I mean, obviously we've been, you know, putting our foot on the gas here lately. Obviously, with the timeline that was important last week, we're trying to put pressure on them in terms of our communications and letters. I've only been the chairman of a subcommittee for about 2 months now, so we're trying. But in joking aside, we're trying to use that now. I've been blessed with that position, joining again forces with Chairman Andy Biggs to be able to use that to press on it, and then use that, as I said, to try to make sure we're advancing legislation like the PACE Act and other legislation, which I realize is a related but not directly on point. But the fact is, last week was a win. It was a win to make sure it was clear why this was critically important, and we've just got to keep doing it and keep working to make sure we advance it. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk to the speaker about your bill.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Y'all get it? All right, thank you. Thanks. Now, that's a lot of work, I know. Do you have multiple copies of it?
Well, I don't.
No, it's fine, but thank you.
I want to give it to your office then.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. I don't want to. You haven't got the work, but thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much. I'm the executive director of PAAU.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
it
of
means
course.
so much to us.
Yeah, of course.
So grateful for all your work.
Thanks for all you're doing. Keep it up.
We will.
Keep pushing.
We will.
We got to keep pushing and push. We want to build a narrative on the FACE Act too, because that's so
really
critical.
We really
like
do.
Increase pressure on that in social media and pushing on every member of Congress.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
We'll be in touch.
Hey, how are you?